Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, I have a super special guest, someone who I absolutely enjoy watching, despite my crazy schedule. I wind up sometimes watching the next day. Miss Leah from Prepping by Faith. And Leah, how are you tonight?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm really good. It's been a crazy 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks everywhere. I don't know if you've got that vibe as well.
hmm And I don't know about you, but I haven't been able to sleep very well lately. And I've heard a lot of other people saying the same thing. It's like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm awake all night. And then when I wake up the next day, I'm not really tired. I have plenty of energy, but I'm just not sleeping.
Yeah, I think everyone's got a lot on their mind,
hmm
honestly. I think, with everything going on,
Yep.
we don't go to bed very often in a peaceful state.
hmm
And it's sometimes hard to be mindful and be at ease with what we see and what we notice. I never sleep. So let's say hi to some folks in the Tennessee chat tactical. I never sleep. We die. Hey, Jessica Vision, thank you for posting Prepping by Faith. There's her link. Please, everybody, go and say hello. Hello, Farmer. Rules for thee. Oh, wow. The chats just blew up and went right past me. TT1, hold on. My mother Spark is in there somewhere. There she is. Hey, Loretta. And I'm missing, hey, there's Joe Morgan. And it looks like Nightbot has not run anyone off. I kind of had a conversation with a robot the other day. Only two rules. um, I only get 6 to 7 hours sleep. I get up at 3 a.m. Yeah, I'm up at 5-ish, 4:45. So yeah, I feel you there. Um, Joe Morgan, what are you drinking tonight, Mr. Joe? Dare I ask? Hey, Shorty. Oh man, we've got a good crowd in here tonight. This
Wonderful.
is really exciting. So why don't we do this? Why don't we start? Why don't you introduce yourself, your channel, and let everyone know what your focus is, what you try to bring to the community?
Certainly. So, first of all, thank you so much for having me tonight, Pete. I greatly appreciate the invitation. So, I'm Prepping by Faith. I have actually been on YouTube about a year now, believe it or not. That's crazy to even say out loud. And I really started my channel to just help prepare the entire person spiritually, mentally, as well as physically. I believe that there's a lot of things headed our direction, and we need to be doing everything that we can to be prepared for those. I do occasionally share some small biblical teaching moments on my channel. Right now, I've been focusing more heavily on news topics that I feel like are prevalent and relate to
Mhm.
preparedness. I don't always cover all of the mainstream news topics. A lot of times, I'll touch on stuff that's coming to us. The World Economic Forum and the WHO are doing in the background, and our good friend over there, Billy Goat. So, um, I'll also share some different tips and tricks that I've learned while prepping, some meal planning advice, and really anything that I experience personally that I feel like kind of relates to preparedness and might help somebody in their preparedness journey. And I tell everyone that I'm not an expert in anything. We are all just learning and growing together.
And that's true. I think everybody, and we were talking about it just before the live, everybody, we've all got different experiences, different little niche of what we're good at, what we've seen. And
hmm
I think when we have a chance to do stuff like this, where you get different folks and we can Q&A with one another on the chat, I think it not only benefits the two of us as
Right.
participants, but everybody in the chat gets to think differently now. And much the same way in like a path of faith, you're passing the light from one to the other,
hmm
uh, symbolically. But yeah, and folks, if you haven't had a chance to check out the channel, please absolutely do. And lately you've been doing a lot of food, and there've been certain themes you've been hitting lately. So one of them I noticed was food storage.
hmm
You had a little series going for a while on that, and I figured that would be a really good place to start, because that's the 101. Like you have to have food and goodies to
Yeah.
get through an emergency. So how did you start? And then how are you approaching it now that you've got this experience, this knowledge?
Right. So I think that, for any of us, when we're just starting out with prepping, it can be a little bit overwhelming, especially as your eyes get open to the fact that there's a lot more there than just food and water. And you realize, there's so many things to consider, everything from medical to security to training and all of that. But, sticking to the basics of food storage, I think for us, a lot of people do it different ways. Some people focus more heavily on calories. Other people will talk about food in the way of pounds. But for us, what made sense to me is meal planning, right? And then putting some math behind that. So combining the two. So, for us, I would think about what are the meals that we regularly eat? How can I figure out how many of those we're going to want to eat in a year span? Figure out the ingredients that I need to put those together, and then start purchasing those items so that I have my core here, and then branch off of that. Because we can talk about, our cooking oils, our meats, our canned goods, all that stuff. But if you don't have, a core meal figured out and a meal plan, then you're going to kind of lose that structure that you need to be able to really start building up your pantry. So for me, what I would suggest that people do is, figure out what it is that you want to make. I'm going to use the example of, spaghetti. A lot of us eat spaghetti, right? So I figured out that, we eat spaghetti in my household about once every 2 weeks. So if I want to eat spaghetti once every 2 weeks for a year, what am I going to need to make that meal, right? So what we go through is about a half a jar of Sam's Club, the ragu sauce,
Right.
1 pound box of thin spaghetti pasta, and then 1 pound of hamburger meat. And then I did some, just do some basic math on that. And then I know that I need 26 boxes of thin spaghetti. I need 13 jars of pasta sauce, and I need
Right.
26 pounds of hamburger. And then from there, just start building on that. How many times I go to Sam's Club, and that's where I pick up a lot of this stuff. So then I know, I
Right.
can start picking up those 6 packs of spaghetti, the three, packs of sauce, and the 3 pound packages of hamburger meat until I hit that
Right.
goal. And really, that's how you need to do it, is just simplify it for you. You could go ahead and do the same thing if you were talking about canned vegetables. Let's say you
Right.
eat, you eat a serving of canned vegetables. You go through 1 can 3 times a week. Do some math on that if you want enough for a year, and multiply that out. You're going to need 156 cans of vegetables, and then just start working on whittling that goal down. So that's what I would suggest that people do. And really, really focus on the foods that you eat, that you enjoy, and then also make sure that you are aware of portion sizes, because
Right.
most of us are eating more than the portion size that's listed. Going back to that pasta sauce, it may
Yeah.
say that a serving size is a quarter of a cup, but if you're eating a half a cup, you need to account for that and make sure that you are storing enough food up for your family. I mean, you want to thrive in a crisis, not just survive.
Right. And you bring up a good point because I think a lot of people when they start, you buy things that you think are a good idea, but you've never eaten before.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen I've done some cooking videos. I know you've done some recipes too. It's good to cook with your preps, and in
Yes,
your
it
case,
is.
you're doing it the opposite. You're like, I already cook with this, so that's going to be my prep.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you stay on budget? Do you have any tips? Like, so obviously you're breaking it out where you're like, okay, I can budget this. This is my goal. I'm going to budget this
Mm-hmm.
over 52 weeks for the year. Do you look for any like coupons? Somebody, I think it was coffee. Somebody had pointed out, look for the buy one get one and the coupons. Have you done any of that? Have you found that to be a successful
You
path
know,
to
you
getting
can
preps?
do that. I never really did it that way, just because I knew I wanted to acquire in bulk. And I found that the best deals for our family is just to stick with those big box memberships most of the time. So that's where we get the majority of stuff that we're putting aside for our preps. I know a lot of people will go to places like the Dollar Tree and pick up items. That's another good place that you can look. But just make sure that you're always checking those expiration dates, making sure that you're getting stuff that's out far enough when you're putting those things away, is stuff that I would say to watch out for. And then, like you said, definitely test them out too, guys. I mean, I can talk about hamburger meat and say, you have the fresh stuff that you're putting in your freezer and then you're using that. But if you're going to start using stuff, we've stocked up heavily on Keystone. That's another thing that we have in our household. And then I also have a bunch of that, the Members Mark canned chicken. So I noticed that recently we had a bunch of our canned chicken that was coming up on date. So I started, and that's where these canned chicken, recipes came from, is that, I already make those types of things, but I'm like, well, what is this going to taste like with canned chicken? And one of the things I realized, and it may just be that particular brand, is that the sodium content is really high in that.
Super high,
It is.
yes.
And so I put it into a mesh strainer and I rinse it off really well with some water and drain that before I started cooking it. Because the first meal that we did, I didn't do that. And the salt was just, it was too much.
Yeah.
So you want to think about stuff like that. You really want to practice with it. You want to know what you're going to, because you don't want to get into a situation where you need to use this stuff and then you realize, wow, I can barely stand to eat this.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point because if you have dietary restrictions for
Mm-hmm.
your wellness, you don't want to bombard yourself with salt out of the blue because there's an emergency and you're hitting those canned goods. And in the pre-made stuff, the Mountain House, Ready Wise, August and Farms, that's very heavy in sodium.
Mm-hmm.
So do you look at all, I mean, aside from the general meal planning, do you look at, vitamin mineral content, special dietary needs? Is that really a big factor for you, or is that just part of
Not
the
not as much in our household because the four of us, we don't have anything. Like, the only thing I have to watch out for is my youngest one is she has a lactose sensitivity, so we have to be mindful of that. Just stuff for her. So if you have somebody like that in your family, I would definitely, make sure that you're researching what you're going to want to stock up for them as well. Like, talking about the sodium content, there's a lot of different canned vegetables and soups and things that are lower in sodium that you're going to want to focus on. I know there's a lot of people, I think, that probably have gluten issues. So, paying attention to that, those needs as well, are going to be important things to watch out for.
Now, do you do any experiments? Because I like to cook. I grew up around a bunch of Italians, so that, needless to say, that was influential on my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll go and I'll grab new stuff and I'll start cooking it just to see if I can make it work. I've had made some really good recipes. I've had some train wrecks where I
Oh, yeah.
took a few spoonfuls. I'm like, oh
That is
Lord,
not
that's
good.
bad. That's a booby trap into the trash. So have you ever had that happen? You're cooking something new. Do you experiment a little with the recipes and the ingredients? And have you had a couple of failures where you're like, "Ooh, nope, that's not going to work"?
There's been some times where I've gotten, usually whenever I look for a recipe online and then somebody will say this is fantastic and then we'll try something like that, I notice that, we're not as wild about it as the reviews seem to be. So yeah, that happens. But I think that when you cook a lot, kind of, what's going to taste good and what isn't, just by reading the ingredients, right? So you can kind of go through some of those and then you kind of know what to add a little bit more flavor to that too, right? I know for me personally, I use a lot of garlic and onions in my food because I want that flavor profile in there. So I'm heavy on that. Really, I don't know what we would do if we didn't. I have tons of garlic salt stocked up because I use that in everything. I really don't use like salt because it already has the salt in it. So for me, that's
Right.
that's an easy go-to is
And
that.
that's a good point you bring up, is the spices, because
Mm-hmm.
I'll buy big spices, and like, my now young adult children are like, "Why are you buying this monster cinnamon?" I'm like, "I put it in my pancakes, I put it in my oatmeal, like
Right.
it's really good."
Yeah.
And I mean, it takes me a month, 2 months to go through it. Do you find yourself doing the same things, like a little bit of a insanity on the spices rack, or
Oh yeah, I've got so much of that stuff stocked up, it's ridiculous. But I kind of look at it too, and I think, it's going to last a really, really long time. I have some seasoned salt actually on my wheel that I've had, and I think it says it expired like in 2017 or something. I'm still using it. There's nothing wrong with it. We use it occasionally. I'll put it on some fries or something, and we'll eat that. But um, most of this stuff is going to last a long time. But bringing that up, what you just said, I think a lot of it's going to depend on your area as well. And so for us here, we are in Colorado. It's very dry here. And so that's another factor in food storage as well, is understanding your climate, understanding, what you may be able to store that somebody else might not be able to. And then we're at a really high elevation as well, which also helps
Okay.
with some of that food storage and being able to get away with certain things that maybe some people can't. So you need to think about that. When you're putting up food for long-term, especially, you're going to want to put that stuff into Mylar or, some
Yeah.
equivalent with oxygen absorbers.
It's funny you mentioned that because I went from sea level
Mm-hmm.
to, people don't realize, this western part of Texas. I'm at a higher elevation than Las Vegas out here.
Oh.
So, and Las Vegas is right by the Grand Canyon, like they're way out there. And all my recipes got messed up. I cooked stuff and it was undercooked. The bread was flat. I'm like, what have I done wrong? And then it occurred to me, oh, genius, you're like at 3,000-foot elevation. Everything is different now. Have you, over time, now, I'm assuming you guys have been where you are for a while. You don't have to experience relocating repeatedly, right?
No, sorry. That went down the wrong pipe. So my dad was actually in the Navy. 1 second. See, that's what happens when you guys do a live show. You never know. You're going to get choked on water or your saliva
Oh,
or who knows what.
I had to kennel all the dogs because they
Oh,
had a
yeah.
riot just before I came on, and they beat up Jackson again. I don't know what he did this
Aw,
time. So he's been the recipient of several dog beatdowns in the corner over there. So
poor baby.
yeah, well, he provokes it. He's the little yappy one, and he
Yeah.
riles everyone else up. But he weighs 12 pounds, and each corgi weighs 25.
Oh, yeah. So he's like half their size.
Yeah, and they just use him as a ping pong ball, and I have to go rescue him. So
Poor baby.
he's
Yeah.
in
So as far as
protective custody.
relocating, though, we've been here quite a while. My dad actually retired from the Navy back in 2000.
Okay.
And then we ended up out here in about, I think it was 2001. Not in this particular area, but in Colorado.
Right.
And so I've been here, quite a while now. But before that, we did do a lot of relocating. So with him being in the military, I was actually born in Spain, and we lived in Guam, we lived in Scotland, we lived in Oklahoma, Maine, all those different areas. So I'm aware more of, I was a child at that time, but I mean, you're still aware of the differences in humidity and that sort of thing. Here, we haven't had to, thank God. I can't imagine even trying to move all of these preps at this point in time. The
Oh,
thought of trying to pack all this stuff up, and it isn't even just ours, because I don't know if you are aware of this or not. Most people are, I think, that follow my channel. We actually share a home with my parents, so they're downstairs with all their stuff as well.
oh,
And,
wow.
so my mom is very heavily into preparedness as well, and so she has, our basement is just, it's packed full of stuff, and so I can't even imagine trying to figure out
Well, and it's funny because we lived in Houston on the coast. Hurricane Harvey was like hurricane number 8 for us. And, the company was like, do you guys want to reload? And I wanted to kick my young adult kids out anyway. So I was like, sure, I'll reload. And,
right.
they gave me a nice package and off we went. And in the middle of the move, I'm like, my God, what have I gotten into? What a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Because the movers, technically, I have wines. They're not supposed to take wines. They're not supposed to take mason jars. And, there was some money dispensed to the movers. Like, well, can you just wrap that and put it and call it jars? And imagine, yeah. So sometimes a little bribery goes a long way, but they actually moved it for us.
That's great.
But that's something in the back of my mind. Like, the company may say, hey, we need you somewhere else. And granted, it'll probably be in Texas anyway.
Right.
But I still got to pack everything up and move 4 hours away, 5 hours away again. And it's like, oh. So yeah, if you've been there for a while, I can't even fathom what a mess that would be, trying to
Oh my
relocate the
gosh.
family.
Just the logistics of it, between, having basically 2 families in one household anyhow. And then, their needs versus our needs. We're not in the same age bracket anymore. So just trying to accommodate that would be interesting. So
Oh, no, Jessica's off for coffee. I've done it twice in 1 year. My back still hurts thinking, oh
Ooh,
man, I can't even imagine doing it
God love
twice in a
you.
year. And so I guess that leads us to the next question. So we talked about food and water and kind of how to organize that thought process.
Mhm.
But you did a few really great videos on hygiene and wellness, which I think one of our tasks during Harvey was to try to evaluate, water treatment plants, many of which were absolutely flooded. You like drive up and you're like, underwater.
Oh,
That
wow.
was an easy evaluation. It's flooded. But you touched on some of this with the water and the hygiene, because you look back at like the 1800s, you were more likely to die from an infection than, a bandit or, a tribe coming to kill you. Like you just get it bit the wrong way and down you
Mhm.
go. So what was your approach to that? Like, how did you formulate that in your head and then execute?
Um, I guess I'm not remembering or recalling the exact video. But as far as hygiene and wellness goes, I feel like this is just one of those topics that, we could go in so many different directions with. And like you and I were talking about before the show started, I feel like one of the big ones is just, human waste management and what to do with that, right? I think that is a big one that we don't really talk about as much as we should. I know that Lee over at Cold War Prepper has touched on it several times. And I think it's important that we bring it up because as we have, new people come over, they may not be aware of how to handle these sorts of things. And we talk about having the luggable loos and those in the buckets and having one for, feces and one for urine. But I think understanding what you need to do with that once you've got it full is going to be an important step, so people need to understand that you can't just, dig a hole in your backyard and sit that anywhere you want to. You need to make sure that it's at least 200 feet away from any water sources, especially
Yeah.
if you're planning on accessing any of your groundwater either. I mean, you're going to want to put that quite a ways away and make sure that you're going down far enough with that to get rid of that. Understanding too that a lot of those bags, those compost type bags that you buy for those bins are biodegradable, right? And so you need to be storing those in a cool, dry location because they are biodegradable. And after about a year's time, they're going to start losing some of that structural integrity. So I would say at least rotate through some of those or,
Yeah.
replace those every year, having your large contractor bags to help move some of that if you're going to be, you don't want a hole in that. And also, I think gloves, I think is going to be a huge one. Have plenty of boxes of those nitrile gloves to cover
Yeah.
your hands because you just don't know, not even just handling that, but there could be all kinds of different messes that you might encounter, bodily fluids from vomit to blood to, whatever it is. I mean, and even your animals can have accidents, so be planning for them. Having the doggy pet pads and things if you had to stay inside for a while and it was unsafe for them to go out to the toilet. These are things that, we need to be thinking about. I know some people actually compost some of that stuff, and I'm not really confident in doing something like that. I mean, I think you would probably be okay more with your urine, but if you're going to be talking about feces, I know there's a lot of pathogens and parasites and
Yeah.
things that can, if you don't know what you're doing, I wouldn't try to do that. So these are things that I think we need to discuss a little bit more. Did you have anything that you wanted to add there? I know we have stocked up heavily on cat litter as well.
Yeah.
To kind of help.
Um, that's shoot, you touched on quite a bit, and there's still stuff I'm trying to get. Sanitary, like the hand wipes,
Oh yeah, the the baby wipes and stuff too.
baby wipes, and even the unscented ones that you can use for your body, because during there you go.
These are
Uh,
great too. People
During
should
Hurricane Ike, we
definitely.
lost water, and we wound up on we had an old subdivision that had diesel backup for the well water, but
Mm-hmm,
by Hurricane Harvey, we were on city water. They had changed everything,
mm-hmm,
and people were having all sorts of problems. And the baby wipes for your body.
mm-hmm.
Also, sanitizer. Granted, we've heard enough about
Yes,
sanitizer with the
yes.
Rona, but salmonella and botulism were not a joke.
No,
Uh, and cholera is definitely not a joke. If you're handling something and
right.
then you have to consume food, in the guard, I'll never forget, he's one of the sergeants was like, you have the five F's: food, flies, finger, feces, and face. Those are the ways you get contaminated. And
Yeah, it makes
it
sense.
was a terrible way to say it, but we all sat there and went, no, that makes sense,
It
because
makes
you're in the
perfect
field,
sense. Yeah.
and you get stuff on your face and your hands, and in it goes. So yeah, I mean, those are great points. Also, bleach.
Yes, bleach.
The igloo
Definitely bleach.
cooler, you put bleach and water, and that makes a half decent sanitizing
Yes.
lotion. If you, I mean, it smells horrendous, but gets the job done,
Mm-hmm.
without a doubt. So once you boo boo in a kitty litter box, it's SHT.
That's great.
Hey, but at least if you're drunk and you went potty in the litter box, I would be less upset than if you pooped the yard. That
Mm-hmm.
would probably upset me way more. Um, well, that was a great one. So, and that's good. So how would you like? Because my kids, as you know, are grown. One's a veterinarian, and I
Right.
have two soldiers. So at this point, they should know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're dealing with little kids, as it is, little kids eat rocks and chew on crayons sometimes. So, uh, little or younger people in the circle, how do you have a way to guide them, or do you just like, here's the rules, kids, and that's what it is, kind of thing?
I think it's going to depend on the child a lot. As a parent of
True.
two girls, like I noticed that, you have one that might be a lot more hygienic and responsible in that way. And then your other one may just be like everything out the window and messy. And I mean, because that's kind of how it is in my household. I have one on one end of the spectrum that's like a
Yeah.
clean freak, and then I have one that isn't. So I think you're going to have to guide depending upon that. If you're in a situation where water is scarce, you might have to monitor that other one a lot more closely. But I think having things on hand, like you're talking about, ready for them to use, that's really accessible to them, is going to be a good idea. And I think those canisters of like the Clorox wipes and things too, so that you can just, wipe down surfaces constantly. Because,
Yeah.
one of the things that we don't touch on enough is that, if you're in a situation where water's scarce and you're trying to maintain hygiene, you're not going to have, tons of cloth that you're going to want to be piling up that you've then got to wash, because that's going to waste more of that precious water. So anything that you can have that's already in a can ready to go, I think is just going to be a lot easier, in those situations. And things like dishes, we don't even talk about how are you going to wash your dishes. I mean, we talk about having things like paper plates, but what happens when you run out of those, right? And you're still going
Yeah.
to have your pots and pans or whatever else it is that you're using. And so one of the things I had thought of was that you could use a baby wipe to get the most of the stuff off of that plate or whatever it is that you have there. And then if you had a bucket that you put a gallon of water in and a tablespoon of bleach, you can then let that dish sit in there for several minutes
And
and then let it air
sanitize it.
dry. So that way you're not wasting so much water trying to do your dishes.
No, and those are really good points. And I guess a lot of folks, we tend to fixate, and we were talking about this before, like on the food or the pews or first
Right.
aid kit, and those are the fundamentals. But then when you start putting it all together, and then it's like, well, how do I clean my hands? How do I wash the dishes? Because you don't want to cook meat and then not
Yes.
wash that dish.
Exactly.
And then, there's salmonella later, or,
Mm-hmm.
there's waste and there's cholera. What the UN troops did in Haiti. Well, Haiti's a disaster now, but what was it, like 5, 6 years ago? And they went there, and those soldiers had no hygiene, and they contaminated the drinking water upstream from a
Oh my
town,
goodness.
and they had a cholera outbreak. I mean, so yeah, it's important to be cognizant of that kind of stuff. That's really solid advice. Now, those are kind of black and white subjects, right? You have to
Oh
maintain
yeah. Oh
hygiene
yeah.
or you
Oh
get
yeah.
sick. You have to have food or you starve. Yeah.
Right.
But this one's a lot more nebulous. And this one, I know you and I agreed we could probably go down a rabbit trail.
Oh yes, we could.
Trying to make a moral or a Christian decision in bad times. Because even in good times, well, right now it's kind of funky times, but even today, I'm sus of a lot of what I see in the street.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see people and be like, I don't know about you. when things get really bad, I mean, we saw it in 2020, like the cities were on fire
Mhm.
for whatever reason, political crime. How do we keep that humanity, have that moral compass? This is a tough question. So by all means,
It is a very tough question, so I had thought of several different things when I was thinking about this, but before we really get into this one, I really wanted to just tell everybody, be clear on what the Word of God says. The Bible tells us that we're all supposed to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling, right? And we need to learn how to use sound judgment. That's something else that, is all throughout the scriptures. So, like you said, everything that we're presented with isn't necessarily going to be black and white. There's going to be a lot of gray area there. And so we need to be as close to the Lord as we can be, so that He has the ability to get our attention, right? And to alert us. And, that isn't always going to be a loud, booming voice. It's going to be a small, still voice of the Holy Spirit speaking to you and prompting you to pay attention. But in order for us to get to that point, we have to make sure that we are putting the Lord first, that we are praying, that we are reading, and that, if we want Him to do His part, then we're going to have to go ahead and do ours as well. So, I mean, I would say in a lot of these instances, like you said, we're going to have to navigate that, but using a lot of prayer. Now in some instances you may only have a split second to make a decision, and you're going to have to go with your gut instinct in that situation. I think one of the biggest moral issues that I think of as a Christian in a really major SHTF event is, am I obligated to help out my fellow man, right? I think that is one of those that, it really sort of depends on the situation, doesn't it? You have to use sound judgment and wisdom in any situation. And I think that we all have to be willing to extend help where we can if we have the means to do so. But if you're in an all out chaos situation, like you were just talking about, where it's unsafe to even open your door, then you're going to have to make that decision. And, protecting your family is probably going to win out in that scenario.
Yeah, this is true. And also you have to also figure that not everything is going to be as it seems, you know.
Right.
Today if you see someone who's injured and they say, "Hey, I'm hurt,"
Right.
chances are they're probably hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But in a collapse of any type or any kind
Right.
of chaos, they may be lying. There may be other people lying in wait for you.
Yes,
Um
exactly. And they will use
actually,
children, they will use women, they
yes.
will use whatever to pull at your heartstrings. And I think that's going to be, I mean, that's one that my husband and I have talked about a lot, is the children, because, as a parent especially, I have a lot of empathy for children, and if I
Mhm.
saw, a suffering child, I'm going to instinctively want to help, but I'm going to have to use some judgment there. One of the things I thought about is, it's one thing if you see a baby unattended or a toddler, right? You can, if you've stayed back and you've watched the situation, there's no adults around, you're maybe safe to go ahead and act and bring that child into your home. But when you're talking about an older child or even an adult, you've opened yourself up to the possibility of them letting somebody in when you're not paying attention, and then, having somebody, swarm your home. And so the question you have to ask yourself too is, do you have enough manpower to keep eyes on that new addition at all times? Because you're not going to be able to let them just freely roam around your home. They're an unknown entity, right? And so you have to think about that. Do you have enough people to make that happen?
Yeah, it's that's a really loaded topic because where do you draw the line?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you help? And you don't know. Heck, the kid could be a lunatic. I mean, we've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
If a child is taught to do horrendous things, a 15, 16-year-old can cause harm as quite easily as a grown man or
Of
woman.
course, right. And then when you
And
have daughters or something, your loyalty is gonna, I say at the end of the day, you're gonna have to make a decision, and your safety and the safety of your family should be winning out in that situation.
yeah, yeah, no, that's absolutely true. It's and actually Prepper Book Club touched on. I was about to say it. The book club beat me to it. Um, a good time to get to know people is beforehand. Like you
Exactly.
said, people you know in church, people you've worked with in the community. Heck, coworkers, guys I've known for years, in a meeting, they were having the riots, and in the back of the room, I'm just talking to the guy next to me, and I go, well, they're mugging people in the street. We all need to be gray men. Now, I know the guy next to me is ex-military, so he knew what I was saying. So we're giggling in the corner, and two faces did this. And I said, he understood what we were talking about. And lo and behold, a guy I've known for 12 years winds up being another prepper who had actually mapped out every golf course community in Houston, saying, well, if I have to evacuate this way, I know where all the green spaces are.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, well, who would have known? Doggone it.
Right.
But now we have this very loosely formed group of homesteaders and engineers and farmers that we all kind of keep tabs on each other.
That's great.
Which is not a bad thing. But again, now is a great time to know where my friends are.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing is that a lot of us will talk about, making sure that you have people right in your area. And that can be good on some levels, right? You need, people in your area, but I don't think it's a bad idea to even form groups and, as far as your statewide, where there's people in different areas of the state that you can communicate with, either that, if something were to happen in your area, maybe you could get to their area for safety. So, I mean, those are things to consider as well. Uh-oh.
Ta-da! Too many buttons. I have all these buttons, and I was clicking the wrong one apparently. So, well, I also posted my own premiere at 2 a.m. when nobody was awake except for like 3 people. So apparently someone got booted there for not being nice. So yeah, and that's fine. That's absolutely awesome, because I'll go back and kick them out.
Oh, somebody's being ugly in chat tonight, huh?
Yeah, well, it was one. They didn't last too long. Either Tennessee or Hudson whacked them on the head pretty quick. No, Tennessee got him. Was that Highlander or McMuffin or whatever his name was? So
McMuffin.
And bye-bye. Yeah. Okay, no, that sounds like a winner. That sounds great. Yeah, no. Yeah, if they're not going to play nice, they can go to Shiboba. That's not, for those of you who've heard me say that before, Shiboba is the Aztec Underworld. It's basically Hades. So yeah, so they can, but there's dragons there instead of demons. So for those of you who wonder, Prepping by Faith draws a rowdy crowd.
I have a lot of hate out there. I don't know why. I haven't figured that out. I'm like, I think I'm a fairly nice person, but some people, I think they will mistake that for weakness. And so, if anybody knows me, I'm not a weak person. I will defend myself. So
yeah, no, Rapture Ready has the little hammer ready for. So, oh man, it's always fun. So I guess this next one kind of segues from the one we just spoke about, finding others. So church, great place. If you're a first responder or service member, that's not always the case. You could get shady people in churches. We've all seen that.
Right.
You can get shady people in the military, or bad cops, or bad firefighters. But it's a good place to find folks. Where else have you found that you're successful in finding like-minded people?
Well, one of the things that I discovered is, I don't know if you remember this, but a while back on my channel, I had actually put out that I was starting a local group in our state. And so I found a lot of really nice people that, most of them are out quite a ways away from where I'm at, but we still have our meeting every 2 weeks. We get together via Google Meet. And I love doing that because we will just have an open forum discussion. And so anything that's on our minds that we want to talk about, that we are trying to figure out, we can work through those issues together and just kind of, bounce ideas off of each other. And I think that's great. I think that's the kind of thing that, is very helpful to a lot of us. and, different ones that have, way more advanced systems when it comes to solar and stuff than I do. It's nice to talk and learn about those things, and, different things that I can work towards. So, I'm not the one, always leading or the expert on whatever topic that we're talking about. It's just, casual, and everybody comes with, what they want to talk about that week. So you're muted again.
Fed Up American is trying to taunt Nightbot into giving him a
Oh, give
timeout.
it.
God, sorry guys. Yeah, finding good people to work with is tough. Surprisingly, I don't know if you've experienced this. You get the haters, like we had Knucklehead here tonight, but who's now, I sent him to Shabalba, so he won't come back anymore. I permanently timed him out. But you also, I've met a lot of people. There are a lot of people in the chat who we email each other. We have each other's phone numbers. Folks checked on Vision because he's up in Ohio, even though it turns out he's like 200 miles away.
That's good.
I know Hudson shot me a text this morning because he's like, "Hey, I heard there was some seismic event near where you live," and there's a lot of little texts and emails going back and forth.
Yeah.
We kind of have our own very loose mag on YouTube. Are you noticing this as well?
Oh, yeah. I have a lot of people like that have my number, that we communicate with each other, and I love it. I think that's great, really being able to build on that community, even though we're all in, different states. It's still nice to know that somebody else out there, cares about you and is checking on you and cares about your well-being, And I think people really need that right now too. I really do. It doesn't matter, how advanced you are in preparedness. You still need other people there to help build you back up. And especially, with all of us, you mentioning, people that, as subscribers, but also as content creators, because there's a lot of stuff that we deal with that's a totally different level than, just being subscribed to a channel. You don't see everything that goes on in the background. So it's nice to have people to talk to about those issues as well.
Yeah, and I think as we all kind of how did the first 12 disciples did it first, I think. Yeah, you kind of start to learn new things. You trade notes, and it becomes this whole. Yeah, there you go, Mother Spark. She said it really well. Look at that. It's like a little family behind the scenes.
There you
go. I like old Mutt meet and greet, but do background checks. and okay, so to that point, we talked about, you have daughters, right? And I'd mentioned before, I have my daughters probably cut open a good 1,000 animals to save them. So like grabbing her and she gets her hand on any kind of blade, it's going to be a very bad experience for someone. But this is a young woman who's done surgery. She's seen trauma and whatnot. But dealing with younger kids, you worry about them because they're just old enough to make their own decision and make a wrong one.
Yes.
Or trust the wrong person. Have you any thoughts on like how do you talk to kids? For my kids, they were in Scouts, so I'm like, okay, be prepared. Hurricane, prepared, and that was kind of a linear thing for me. But have you had any challenges kind of conveying to your kids or even other children like, hey, you really should think like this?
I think that, life is a great teacher in a lot of ways. I mean, different experiences. The video that I just put out recently where my daughter had a child on the bus that, actually, threatened to shoot up the school.
That's right.
And that situation, is a great example of how we need to be having these types of conversations with our children, because, we think about preparedness, right? And we're always thinking about, the more doomsday type scenarios or natural disasters. But in a lot of ways, there's other things that maybe we're not covering as much that we should be. But I was just so grateful in that situation that all of those children really took the responsibility the way they should. And as soon as that bus stopped at that school, all of those children that had heard that went in and reported it immediately, even kids that were friends with him, and they recognized that their safety could be in peril and the safety of the rest of the kids at school, right? And so I think that's something that we need to be talking to our children about as well. Even if you're worried about, getting a friend in trouble or something, there are times when you have to go ahead and report it. You have to speak up because you don't want to, take those types of chances.
Yeah, and it's scary, but you think about it, there's always a lot of people. How would I describe it? I think they want their children to be innocent, and I get that,
Right.
but you don't serve them by making them oblivious. I think
Exactly.
there's a difference between innocence and obliviousness.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a way to convey messages to, I mean, obviously a 16-year-old, it can be, all right, knucklehead, sit down. We need to have a conversation. By the time my kids were in high school, I was very unfiltered, but it was for their benefit that they understand the world. But younger kids don't get that.
Right.
But there's a way to say it that makes their, I guess, gets their little lights to turn on. But yeah, you're right, and especially with young kids now, God, with the trafficking and the predatory behavior and the
Hmm.
normalization of it. Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing symptoms of an SHTF happening on a normal day to day. So I can imagine it would be hard to teach kids. So folks, just, I mean, her advice is solid. Make sure you have those communications with the family. Um, wow, believe it or not, we are almost at an hour.
I don't know how that happened. That
I,
went
I
by
I
like
just looked up and
so
went, oh
fast.
my, like we ran out of questions. Wait a minute.
Wow.
So I guess what I'll do at this point, unless you have something else, we'll open a Q&A.
Sure.
Okay, so I actually use all caps, but the robot's going to get you. So just say question in all caps and then put your question in lowercase. So hopefully Nightbot doesn't bite you or anything. Um, yeah, it was Hunter, you're going to give me your, okay. Now they're picking on each other in the chat, but that's fine. I treat my kids like short adults from Kentucky Survival.
You know what? And I think that, it's like you were saying earlier, we have to have those conversations. It's like even I have one that's 8 and I have one that's almost 13. And so I have to tailor that conversation to their ages, but you still need to be talking with them. And I think,
Right.
especially as they get a little bit older, like her, going from a preteen into a teen, that self-centered thing is just so rampant in them. I
Yeah.
don't know if you notice that as well with yours, but it's really bad. And so they're so fixated on what's going on in their world that one of the things I did with her is I really sat her down and I made her watch one of the videos of what was going on over in Turkey. And I was like, look, this is happening in the world. This is the stuff that, is important. These people are never going to see their children again. These children, some of these children are never going to see their parents again. They're orphans. You need to understand, how good you have it. Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to shake them a little bit and be like, look, let's wake up a little bit. You don't understand. There's so many people that, don't have even a bed to sleep in or food to eat. And you're worried about your Nike Air Force Ones or whatever
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Whatever it is. Okay, I got a question. Two good ones. One from Tennessee Tactical. What originally got you into preparedness? For him, it was multiple tornadoes.
Sure. So for us, I think that being in, as a military child, I think that preparedness was always, to a certain degree, a part of my life. So we, with my dad being in the Navy, we were always prepared for, events to happen, overseas. We went through hurricanes in Guam that shut off the power. I've been through ice storms in Oklahoma and in Maine that we were out of, utilities and stuff for a couple weeks at a time. So my parents were always prepared, and I sort of saw that. My mom came from she's one of 12, and she had a lot of food insecurity growing up. So she always had extra food put up. And I just watched that. And all my aunts, same story. Whenever we would go to visit, I would see all of that. And so it was normal for me to have a well-stocked pantry, to have bottled water. We always drank bottled water. Being overseas, you don't want to drink the water. So, just kind of came up with that mindset. And then I would say that, obviously what happened in 2020 sort of propelled us to go a step further with what we had. We had already acquired probably about a year's worth of freeze-dried food before that. In 2015, we were just thinking it was a good idea to have on hand. But then when everything happened in 2020, we just stepped it up, and we went and made sure, for us, our goal was to hit 2 years worth of supplies. And that's kind of where we've sat right now. But
Okay. So wow, so that was just like a family legacy thing that just
I would
it's
say
just
so.
what you
Yeah.
did.
Mm-hmm.
So a good one by Hudson. How many folks have joined your group since your conversation?
It's still really small, Hudson. I haven't been advertising, and it's probably my fault. If I advertised it more on my channel, I think that, as I'm growing, then maybe people would be aware of it. I don't think that a lot of people are aware that I'm still doing this, right? So it's mainly been word of mouth, I think. And so we're only sitting at probably about 6 or 7 of us that show up regularly. So we're still really tiny. But we're consistent. And I think that's what's important, is that we're all still showing up. We're all still dedicated to this. I still get, emails constantly. Hey, we're still doing the group this next week, so everybody's engaged. Everybody wants to participate. And I would rather have people there in small numbers that actually want to be there and are engaged in the conversation than, 50 members that show up once in a while.
Well, good deal. Yeah, small is not bad. Yeah, Hudson even said small is good.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll get even, Hunter. I deserve it. Okay, now they're just picking on each other in the chat. All right, well, that's good. And folks, remember, not every group is the same. Some may be more loosely affiliated. Some may be very tight knit.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of gotta go with what works. See, for me, it's weird because I don't travel as much as I used to, but when I did, I basically had friends at the company all over the place. So any place I landed, I had a go-to location. Like
That's
they're
great.
like, you have an emergency and you're in Denver, you go to the Denver office and then go to this facility.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had guys actually get stranded overseas in like countries that don't like folks
Oh,
like us.
no.
And they went to a safe spot and helicopters came and got them and they were gone.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, that's cool and horrifying,
At the
but
same time.
at the same time. But even having, friends like we do, there's actually a group of us here in Texas. We work on, Lee, Texas Red Leg, Cold War, myself.
Mm-hmm.
There's a group of us who are always kind of chatting in the background. And it's pretty well known. Like I've told Red Leg, if you're out west and something goes down, you got a landing strip here. I got a cot, we'll pull it out. You
Mm-hmm.
reset, refill your water and figure out your next move. And then off you go. And, you got that place to get a 6 hours of sleep and a cup of
Right.
coffee. And then you kind of think, so, folks, when you're traveling, even think about that. It doesn't have to be a really tight knit group. It could be a little more loosely affiliated, but even just having that place to stop and get a cup of coffee and get your brain together,
Mm-hmm.
that would help. So I think we don't have any more questions. I'm friends with Outlaw. I must have a good sense of humor. And that's good. And you know what? That's actually, to that point, having a sense of humor and an ability to be flexible, that is its own prep, my friend.
It is.
Without a doubt.
And common sense. It's not very common.
No. Oh, I have watched 20-year-olds zap themselves trying to change a light bulb.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, how'd you get your finger in there? Like the bulb is supposed to be there. Why was your
Right?
finger in there? Yeah, I'm just happy that my kids are not the kids who electrocute themselves, so I did something right.
That's right.
Oh Lord. So did you have, I don't think we have any more questions unless I missed one. So mods, if I missed a question, please let me know. I don't see any in the chat. Um no, I think we got everything. Okay, so did you have any neither's common courtesy. Yeah, this is true.
Yeah, you've got that right.
So did you know about the cave of cheese?
What?
I have no idea. Okay. Well, now the chat's going downhill. It's getting, so did you have any parting words of wisdom? Any tips? Any thoughts? That you'd like to share with everyone? We had a really good group in the chat too,
Yes, we did.
and it was quite hilarious. I'm gonna have to play this back just to watch the snarkiness that went back and forth with everybody. But did you have anything you wanted to share before we close up the live that folks might benefit from?
I would say just keep working on, new skills. I think that's important that we just keep pushing ourselves. Yes, I agree. Staying flexible is key too. You have to be able to pivot. And I think I did a video on that recently too about, having the ability to pivot because we can plan for all of these things. And as we've witnessed, look at what has just happened, with the earthquake. And then we look at what has happened in Ohio. And so we have to be ready for anything to happen and understand that even if you have a plan in place, it's not going to go according to plan, guys. I don't care how much you practice that scenario, things are going to change, and you're going to have to be able to respond on a dime and think quickly on your feet. I think that's going to be really key. And also, what I always say at the end of my videos, just pray, prep, and put God first.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. I couldn't have said it better, honestly. So, folks, once again, please go check out Leah's channel, Prepping by Faith. You are only on YouTube, or you on Instagram? The
No, I
top.
haven't branched off into any of those other things. I have a hard enough time just trying to keep up with YouTube. So yeah, I'm just on YouTube.
Okay, so if one of the mods can throw her link in one more time, because I'm trying to. I have only one screen. Okay, Hudson's going to throw it on there. Oh no. Here in a second of one of you guys can throw on her link into the chat. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts tonight. I learned a bunch just listening to you.
Well, thank you very
Um,
much for having me.
and yeah, I think Rapture has it. Yeah, and having that faith, and again, you're the name of your channel, Prepping by Faith. Not by fear, not by panic.
That's right.
Uh, Not by agitation, which I've been prone to do from time to time, but prepping in a faithful place. So, folks, we're going to wrap this one up. You guys be safe out there. Be careful. Pay attention to what's going on, and make some new friends. Try to find those people who might be like you, wherever they may be now. So you're not trying to find people when they're freaked out and in the middle of a mess.
Mm-hmm.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Leah, for joining me. God bless, Godspeed, folks, and we will see you all on the next video. You guys take care.
Bye, everyone.